Well, at first, it was very important for me. As soon as I saw the book, they gave me the book, and I said, "Well, if you want me to be involved with anything that has to do with indigenous people and Native Americans," I said, I had had an experience in the '70s where I began to become aware of the nature of what their what their situation was and still is. Um, I've been blithely unaware of that. I was too young. I was in my 20s. I didn't know. And it's taken me years, and I'm fascinated by how do you really deal with um, that culture in a way that is respectful. It also is not hagiographic. It doesn't fall into, I think, Rousseau, like the noble native, that sort of thing. None of that, but something. How truthful can we be and still have authenticity and respect, dignity, and deal with the truth, honestly. So as best we can. Um, Having said that, that story, when I read it, it indicated to me that this would probably be the one that we could deal with that way. And particularly by getting involved with the culture of the Osage and actually placing cultural elements, rituals, spiritual moments. People talk about, they use that phrase, I forget it now, sorry, but it's the realism, mystical realism or something. No, this is real. You see the dream. The dream is real. The ancestors come. The owl is real in a sense, in a way. And so for me, I wanted to know how I wanted to play with that world in contrast with the white European world. And I felt that this could have afforded us the possibility. Ultimately, what happened was that we were dealing with the script on the basis of the David Graham book, which is excellent. But the David Graham book also has the subtitle, The Birth of the FBI. And for about a year and a half to 2 years, I was doing Irishman and that sort of thing. And Eric Roth and I were working. And we felt that we took the story of the birth of the FBI as far as we could take it. And I wanted to keep balancing with the Osage. And it was getting bigger and bigger and more diffused. And ultimately, this was supplemented by the times that we went out to Oklahoma and met with the Osage. My first meeting was with Chief Standing Bear and his group, Julie and Addie Roanhorse and Chad Renfro. And it was very different than what I expected. They were naturally cautious. I had to explain to them I was going to try and deal with them as honestly and truthfully as possible. We weren't going to fall into the trap we think of the cliche of victims or the drunken Indian or the Indian wild, all of this sort of thing, and yet tell the story as straight as possible. What I didn't really understand the first couple of meetings was that this is an ongoing situation, an ongoing story out in Oklahoma. In other words, these are things that really weren't talked about in the generation I was talking to, and the generation above them, before them, I should say. It was the generation before them that this happened to. And so they didn't talk about it much. And the people involved are still there, meaning the families are still there, the descendants are still there. And so what I learned from meeting with them, having dinners with them, Margie Burkhart, I think she was the relative of Ernest Burkhart. She pointed out, and a number of other people pointed out that you have to understand a lot of the white guys there, a lot of the European Americans, particularly Bill Hale, they were good friends. One guy pointed out, he said he was Henry Roan was his best friend, and yet he killed him. And people just didn't believe at the time that Bill would be capable of such things. And so, what is that about us as human beings that allows for us to be so compartmentalized in a way? When I got there, all I can tell you is those prairies are quite something. And they open your mind and your heart. They are just beautiful. And especially driving on these roads, straight road through a prairie, and on both sides, wild horses. and bison and cows. But the wild horses just out to pasture for the rest of their lives. And it was like idyllic. And so I said, where do I put the camera at this point? How much of the sky? How much of the prairie? You know, should it be 185 or should it be 235? We got to go 235. You know, I want to see more of this land. And then I began to realize that the land itself could be sinister. In other words, you're in a place like this and you don't see people for miles, you can do anything. Particularly, it turns out 100 years ago. For me, 1920 is like 50 years ago because I grew up I was born in 42. So the 1920s are the way 90s are now to younger people, the 1990s. So when they told me, Marty, this is 100 years ago, I keep thinking, what are we making, a period piece? I didn't quite. It's like normal. I mean, yes, there were old cars and, you know, but so I said, yeah, it's not really a Western, it's normal. And I said, Marty, this is 100 years ago. And, but when I saw that and I realized this is a place where you don't need the law. I mean, you have the law, but the law isn't working that way. The law, you can make the law work for you if you're smart enough, as we know now, you know, many people do. But what I mean by that is that it's still a wide open territory. You have law, but it's a wide open territory. So the place, as beautiful as it is, can shift to being very sinister. And what I wanted to capture ultimately was the very nature of the virus or the cancer that creates this sense of a kind of easygoing genocide. That's why we went with the story with Molly and Ernest, because that's the basis of the love. The love is the basis of trust. So when there's betrayal that way, that deep, and we know that for a fact that it was that way, here's our story.
Wow.